Hello guys, thank you so much for joining in today. In this video, we're going to be looking at a very popular question in Java and then demonstrating that with an example. And the question is Java always pass by value? And then short answer is yes, Java is always pass by value. And then we're going to be demonstrating that with various examples. So right here on my screen, I have 5 examples and I have labeled every example as a change or no change, basically meaning it is going to change the original object or it's not going to change the original object. Since we already said that Java is always pass by value, most of the cases that it is not going to change the original object. And only few cases that it is going to change the original object is that whenever you call a setter method with a new variable in that object, and if it is a public, if the field is public, you can directly update the public field of that object, and then that will change the original object. So let's jump into example and then we'll go from there. So first example here, I'll label it change, and I have I have a class called a person just for demonstration, and it has a, if we look at here, it has a name and date of birth, and then it has some getter and setter to set the name and get the name, and similarly date of birth. And I also have 2 strings so that I can see how's my person object looks like. So going back to the very first example, this is going to change the object because I'm calling this function called change name. Inside this function, it is calling person.setName, so it is using setter. So when you use a setter, it is going to change the object. So let's go back. This is going to change the object. It is going to set the name from Jack to John. And let's look at second example. Again, here I'm also labeling as a change because it is also going to change the original object. Here I have a Justin as my original object, has Justin name and his date of birth. And then I have this function called add 4 to the year. And what it does is exactly it says it's going to add 4 years in the year that was passed in its parameter here. So this is going to return, if you pass in 5, it is, if you pass in 2000, it's going to return 2004, right? That's the idea. So if we go back here, I'm calling that function, getting a new error, and using a setter again to update the original object. So again, we're using a setter method to update the original object. So that is why it's updating original object. And we have another example, very first example with the label no change, because the last 2 we looked at, they both changed the original object, and the reason for that is they were using a setter method provided in that class. So now we have another example where I'm marking them as a no change. So if we look at, again, we created another person object and we called it Tom, and then we called this method called change anonymous, and that would, after we call that method, we are printing that Tom object again, and then kind of looking at the difference. And here, since I'm labeling as no change, this is not going to change the original object. So let's look at what this method doing here. So basically, I've got the person method here. Let me change this. I just type out wrong here. Okay, I got the person method here, and then what I'm doing here is I'm reinitializing the person to a new person and then calling a setter to that new person's. So here also has a comment saying reinitializing the variable with new object does not change the original object. So although you reinitialize this person here, this is not going to change the original person that you passed in, because again, Java is passed by value. And then when you call person.setName, you are setting this person, not the original person that was passed in. So this method right here is not going to change the person that was passed into this method. So in this method, when we go up here, this is not going to change the original object, because as simply reinitializing the object, and reinitializing the object that was passed in is not going to change the original object. And then it's calling the setter, but that setter is applied to the object that it was created, the object within that method. So That was our third example. Let's look at the fourth example here. This is very easy, straightforward example because we're using primitive types. For primitive types, when things are passed into the method, here it's when it passed into Tina's age here, it's actually passing 25. So it has nothing to do with this variable here. So when it gets to the 25 here, you could add 10 to the 25. It is not going to change the original Tina's age. So that's why when we're printing this one out, it is going to be the same, and that means it's going to be 25. And we have the last example here, and string example. Similarly, a string is also an object here. So I passed in a string here, and then later, if I go to this function, change to Tom, it's basically reinitializing a string to a new string. Again, the reinitializing the object inside this method, not going to change the original object that was passed in. So this is, again, it's because it is passed by value. So that's all the example. I'm going to run this example and show you the output. And let's do that. I'm going to run this. And it is thinking about it. Let me make this screen a little bit bigger, output screen, so that we can see it. So here we go. All right, let's look at what is outputting. So first example, I have Jack, and it changed to John because if you remember in the first example, we called a setter method. Same thing with the second example. We're adding 4 to just in date of birth, and then we also call setter method, so it ended up changing the original object. Third example, labeling as no change. Initial, here's a person Tom with date of birth and the name Tom, and then after we change, call that function called change anonymous. This object is exactly the same. It has name Tom and it has the same date of birth. Even we reinitialize that variable inside the function, inside the method, because again, it was passed in as a value, so it's not going to change the original method. Same thing here for the 25, right? It is primitive type, so if you update the 25, the variable that was passed in here, it's not going to change. And similarly with this string here. So overall, it does make sense if you look at it, and it is always passed by value in Java. If you have any question or comment related to this, please feel free to put them in the comment section down below. And if you like my video, please subscribe to the channel so that I will get motivated to put out more videos. So thank you so much for watching, and then I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.